Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're unpacking the incredibly complex and, frankly, disturbing story of Jeffrey Epstein. It's a story about massive wealth, horrific hidden crimes, and a justice system that for a long time seemed to look the other way. We're going to dig into his rise, his fall, and the powerful network that made it all possible.
To really get this story, you have to understand that there were two Jeffrey Epsteins. On one hand, you had the public face, a brilliant financier and generous philanthropist, always seen with the rich and powerful. But in the shadows, there was the other Epstein, a convicted sex offender at the center of a horrifying international sex trafficking ring.
So that's the big question, right? The one that has haunted this case for years. How did one guy manage to build this empire of wealth and influence while committing these terrible crimes, a lot of the time right out in the open? Well, to figure that out, we've got to go back to the beginning. His whole career is kind of a mystery from the get-go. I mean, his rise was just so fast, it was almost unbelievable. And there are very few public details that really explain how he pulled it off.
You know, his start was, well, it was weird. In 1974, he lands a teaching job at the super prestigious Dalton School, even though he didn't have a college degree. While he's there, he impresses the CEO of the investment bank, Bear Stearns, whose son was a student, and the guy offers him a job. Now, he was eventually asked to leave Bear Stearns, but by 1988, he'd already launched his own, intensely private firm.
His firm, J. Epstein & Company, was basically a black box. The story was that it only managed money for billionaires, but its operations were completely secret. His only confirmed client was Leslie Wexner, the billionaire who founded L Brands, the company that owns Victoria's Secret. And get this, Wexner gave Epstein full power of attorney. That is insane. It basically gave him the keys to Wexner's entire financial kingdom. And here's the crucial part. Epstein wasn't just using this financial power to get rich. He was carefully, meticulously building this incredible web of powerful friends. It was a network that made him look legit, and as we'll see, it ended up acting like a shield for his crimes. I mean, the list of people he was connected to is just staggering. His social circle was a who's who of the global elite. We're talking politicians and heads of state, actual royalty, titans of Wall Street, top academics from places like Harvard and MIT, and of course, famous celebrities. And for years, these high-profile people were happy to praise him publicly. For example, back in a 2002 interview, Donald Trump called him a terrific guy and said he was a lot of fun to be with. But a lot of these relationships started to sour as word got out about his behavior. According to court documents, Trump later banned Epstein from his Mar-a-Lago club over an incident with a young girl. And this is a pattern you see again and again, public friendship followed by quiet distancing once his predatory actions started to surface. Okay, now we have to get into the darkest part of this whole story, the sophisticated criminal enterprise he was running, built on the systematic abuse of young women and girls. Now, this is so important to understand. The charges against him in 2019 weren't just for sexual abuse. They were for sex trafficking. And that is a whole different level. It's a serious federal crime that involves recruiting and exploiting people, which is exactly what prosecutors said Epstein did for decades. And when you look at the two big legal cases against him, the difference is just wild. You have the 2008 state case in Florida, which ended with this ridiculously lenient plea deal. He served just 13 months and even got work release. Then you have the 2019 federal case with much more serious sex trafficking charges, but he died before he could ever face trial. So the official court documents talk about dozens of victims, but investigators and lawyers for the victims, they think the real number of women and girls who were abused could be over 1,000. And let's not forget his key accomplice, Ghislaine Maxwell. She was central to the whole operation, recruiting, grooming, and trafficking girls for him, and she was finally convicted for her role in 2021. All right, that brings us to the final and maybe the most frustrating chapter of this story. This is where we see a total failure of justice and are left with a ton of disturbing, unanswered questions after he died. That 2008 plea deal has been ripped apart by pretty much everyone. It was negotiated in secret by the U.S. attorney at the time, Alexandra Acosta, and it was so broad that it gave immunity not just to Epstein, but to anybody who might have been involved with him. It literally stopped an ongoing FBI investigation in its tracks. A federal appeals court later called it exactly what it was, a national disgrace. Acosta actually had to resign as Secretary of Labor under President Trump because of the public outcry over that deal. But here's where it gets even weirder.
He claimed that during the negotiations, he was told Epstein belonged to intelligence and to just leave it alone. He was basically told that Epstein was above his pay grade. So, fast forward to July 2019. He's finally arrested on those federal sex trafficking charges and is being held in a New York jail. On July 23rd, he's found injured in his cell. Then, on the morning of August 10th, he was found dead. Okay, so the official cause of death was ruled a suicide, but the circumstances were just so suspicious. The 2 guards who were supposed to be watching him fell asleep, records were faked, and 2 cameras right outside his cell mysteriously malfunctioned. So it's no wonder this fueled all sorts of theories that he was silenced to protect his powerful friends.
And that's where we're left. Jeffrey Epstein's death might have closed his own criminal case, but it left the biggest question of all wide open. Now that he's gone, will any of the powerful people who enabled him, who participated in his crimes, or who just looked the other way ever face a full accounting? His story is a chilling reminder of how wealth and influence can be weaponized to corrupt justice, leaving behind a legacy of immense pain and so many unresolved questions.